You're listening to Start Again with Shaunna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ignite Your Brilliance. And this week we are talking about unblocking creativity. How do you spark inspiration for your next big idea? Listen, you probably already have the idea, but let's say that you want to start a podcast. I'm going to try to use this as the example moving forward instead of you can write a book, you can start a business, you can do all the things. Specifically when it comes to starting a podcast, there are going to be moments where you need to be able to tap into your creativity. Now, before we can even kind of get started on the how do we spark creativity conversation, first of all, I need to debunk a little bit of a myth. So oftentimes when people think about creatives, they will say, my favorite myth of all times to debunk is this idea of I'm not a creative person. Because here's the thing, we all are creative. We're creative beings. This is what we were made to do, is to create. So it's not always that we are a painter or we are drawing or we're some sort of artist. Creativity can be so much more than just the ability to create art. It really has a role in problem solving, in all kinds of innovation, and even in personal growth. So all the ways that we can be creative in our life, opening ourselves up to that allows us to become our best self. So we can kind of debunk this whole idea of I'm not very creative, because I will venture to guess that you are creative in some way, shape, or form. And in the ways that you can open yourself up to creative ways of thinking or creating new ways to look at situations like we talked about last week, or any way that you can be mentally flexible in looking at situations. This is all where creativity has a basis. So in order to first identify that you are a creative being and find the ways that you are happiest creating, that's what you want to look at fostering. So let's go back to this example of starting a podcast. You will need to tap into your creativity, whether you are hiring someone to do the cover of your podcast or you're doing it yourself, to be able to kind of wrap your mind around, what do you want it to look like? What colors do you want to incorporate? What's the title that you're going to use? These are all places where creativity has a role. And so we want to be able to look at, how do you unblock creativity? So if you're writing a book, as an example, people are very familiar with the whole idea of writer's block. Well, the same can apply to even just looking at how do you title your podcast. So there are moments where we feel blocked, or we feel like ideas aren't flowing, or we're waiting for this creative inspiration to hit, when there's really some strategies and tactics that you can use to open yourself up to those creative flows. And that's what we're going to talk about this week. Or what are those techniques that you can use to overcome those senses of being blocked? So we can see many common obstacles to creativity, right? So all the ways that we limit ourselves, self-doubt, or being afraid of failing, or this whole idea of trying to be perfect. Perfectionism really does get in our way of being creative. Or this idea that I just don't have enough time, which is bogus. That actually is the very top reason why most people say they don't actually write the book they want to write, or don't start the podcast. I've had a lot of potential podcast clients who have come to me and said, oh my God, I want to start a podcast. That'll be so fun. Oh, I just don't have enough time. Here's what I'm going to tell you. All of those different things, whether you are doubting yourself, by the way, one of the clients that I'm working with right now, we were halfway through recording. So here's the thing. When you launch a podcast, you should launch with 4 to 6 episodes of content already recorded. So when we work together in my 30-day program, we are recording those 4 to 6 episodes together and getting that all ready in this pretty little package so that you can launch with content. So the idea is that when someone stumbles across your podcast for the first time, or you're out there screaming to the world, I just launched this podcast, you want to have material for them to binge on. So a lot of times people will bounce around and listen to a couple different episodes, but you want to have a sampling of your episodes so that people can actually get a feel for what are the things you're going to talk about, how long are the episodes, but you really want to give them an opportunity to like bite into something. And so that's where the recommendation of 4 to 6 episodes comes from. So back to my example, my current client who they're actually a duo and they are creating their podcast together. And one of the ladies had a moment of self-doubt, like debilitating to the point of, I don't think I can do this. I'm not cut out for it. And this is what I told her. Everyone who starts a podcast has moments of doubting their ability and has moments of doubting themselves. And anybody who tells you otherwise, that, oh no, I never doubted my abilities, they are lying. They are in fact lying to you, because everybody has these moments of, who the hell am I to write this book? Who the heck did I think I was to start this podcast? Who's going to even listen to me? Like all these moments of self-doubt creep in for everyone. And so in all the ways that we can kind of identify that that's really just blocking our creativity and it's preventing us from moving forward, we can kind of see it for what it is, set it aside, debunk it, whatever the case may be, to kind of move through that fear or whatever the block is. And then we can move into, all right, how can I be most creative? How can I open myself up to those moments of inspiration so that the ideas are flowing and so that things can kind of get going? And so that's what we are going to talk about today, is how do we specifically use these techniques to overcome blocks. So a couple of these are not going to be surprising to you guys if you've heard any one of my other podcast episodes or any other week in this series, because here's what it comes down to. Shifting your mindset, being intentional about your practices, and working through on purpose where you're going. And then there's always an element of physical activity. These are all ways that we can shift and move through those blocks as they come up. So, when we are focused on adopting a growth mindset, when we are looking at, we talked about last week, the idea of shifting the way we look at a situation and how do we get something out of it? What's the value that we are getting from sometimes crappy situations? Being able to shift your mindset and look at things differently is one of the ways that you'll be able to overcome those blocks as they come up, because you'll be able to call bullshit on whatever it is that your mind is telling you even faster as you practice these things. So obviously, meditation, any sort of mindfulness practice will give you the opportunity to clear your mind, to settle the noise, to reduce stress, and really kind of give you this clean slate. So if we were to use this example of a painter, well, they need a canvas. They need a clean canvas to paint on, to create on. And so if you think of your mind being that canvas for creative ideas, then you want to be able to find ways to clear your mind so that you have a clear canvas to work with. And then journaling, obviously, this is one of my favorite techniques to use, because here's one of the ways that you can use journaling to help you when it comes to starting a podcast. Sometimes we just need to use a stream of consciousness journaling technique in order to kind of get those ideas flowing. So one of my favorite ways to use, I say this about every way to use journaling, don't I? One of my favorite ways, okay, listen, there's all sorts of ways you can use journaling to help you, but specifically in this situation, what I'm referring to is this stream of consciousness where you just write and write and write and write without editing what you're writing, without thinking about what's going on the page, just sitting down and saying, okay. And it's helpful if you kind of start with a question or an idea and then just write whatever nonsense comes out, whether it is for a set amount of time or a set number of pages. If you've read The Artist Way, that's what they talk about, is doing morning pages and every day sitting down and just writing 3 pages worth of content, whatever comes out, even if it's I don't know what to write today. I don't know what to write today. I'm just not sure what I should write about today. The more that you are just writing, it's kind of opening the floodgates to creativity, to the flow of creative ideas. And so journaling can be a really great way to just kind of knock off the muck, because it allows you to just get it all out. So one of the techniques that I teach people when it comes to interpreting dreams is to start keeping a dream log. One of the ways that I help people kind of work through insomnia. So typically when you are waking up in the middle of the night, not able to go back to sleep, it's because you're under too much stress. And usually it's self-inflicted. So one of my favorite suggestions for people when moments of insomnia hit, whether that is you're having trouble going to sleep at night or you're waking up and you can't get back to sleep, is to keep a notepad by your bed. So perhaps it's where you keep your dream journal and you write down the dreams that you're having so you can interpret them, because that's such a great way for us to kind of uncover what our subconscious mind is telling us while we're sleeping. But if we're having trouble sleeping, one strategy you can use is just to write down all the things that you are thinking about. Drafting an email to your ex-husband. Oh gosh, I need to schedule that, pediatrician visit for my kid, or I need to remember to put milk on my grocery list. Whatever the thing is that you're ruminating on, for me, it tends to be all the things I need to do or a difficult conversation that I'm sort of dreading. If I can just write those things down and get them out of my head on paper, it allows me to know, okay, I'm not going to forget about it, whether it's the milk for the grocery list or something more important. And I can then kind of set it aside, very physically set it aside, so that then I can go back to sleep. And it is a really great strategy to help with insomnia. But that's another way that you can use your journaling, is to kind of brainstorm through ideas and kind of write through all the mental clutter and just get it out. One of the best ways that you can tap into your creativity is to go physically move your body, whether that is to take a walk around the block or to go take a shower. Some of my best ideas come to me in the shower, is just to physically move my body. And a lot of times the shower, the reason those ideas come in is because, to me, it's simulating this idea of washing away the muck and clearing the slate. And that's when new ideas can pop in, and new ideas do pop in. So if you are trying to come up with your content for your podcast, this can be a great thing to do, is just get your ass out of your house, walk around the block, listen to some sort of creativity, inspiring music, and just think through the things that you're going to want to talk about on your podcast, or the people that you want to interview. And then when you're able to kind of physically move your body, it kind of clears out all the other extra stuff, and it allows you to come back and really make intentional notes and structure and ideas, and just jot it down. Get it, brain dump onto the page, and get those ideas down. And then it gives you the ability to say, okay, today I'm going to tackle topic number 1, and you can frame out the conversation. I'll tell you, when it comes to starting a podcast, one of the ways I've discovered works really well for me. So I tried 3 different methods for kind of jotting down my content. So one was I fully scripted everything. I had heard plenty of podcast guests say, I write it all out, it becomes a blog, and I just read from the script. I personally don't like doing that. I like to have it flow a little more like a conversation. I like to, sound like I'm just chatting with you guys instead of reading from a book. I did not particularly love narrating my book when I created the audiobook, even though I know it's really helpful for people to be able to listen to a book. I didn't like the act of reading my own words. And so creating a script to read from for a podcast did not work for me. But I tried it. It might work for you. The second is to just run with it. Have a general idea and just riff on whatever the topic of the day is. My mind is a little bit too all over the place for that to work really well for me. So I prefer to do the third option, because almost every time I would try to just run with it, I would forget a main topic, or, leave out an entire idea that I wanted to cover. So what works really well for me is to create an outline with some general bullet points. So I know the story I want to tell, I know the topics I want to cover, and I'm able to kind of move through it in a more conversational way, but in a structured way so that I know I'm not going to forget to talk about anything. So that is one of my suggestions for how do you even start to draft the content of your podcast. So let's talk about, once you've figured out all the ways to clear the blocks, how do you actually spark inspiration? So if you're like, okay, this is great, I'm going to start a podcast and I've got the title, I've got some ideas for the cover, I've got someone to design it. Because listen, you can go out to Fiverr and find someone for very, very cheap to create a podcast cover for you. I happen to include that in my Get Started package when I help people launch podcasts, but you can go out and get somebody to do the creative, making it pretty for your cover. But when it comes to talking about inspiration for what the hell am I going to talk about on this podcast, here are some ways that you can kind of spark that inspiration. So you can spark those moments of creativity to hit you. So one, I've sort of touched on it already, and this is this idea of brainstorming. So whether you are using your journaling or, just jotting down all of the different ideas, I like to have a running note in my phone. I have found that a lot of the really good content ideas come to me, like I said, when I'm in the shower, when I'm driving my kids somewhere, which is all the time, or I'm out on a walk. And so being able to have that note in my phone allows me to just drop it in there anytime I have the idea. When I was hosting a podcast with a friend, we shared the notes so we could each add ideas to it. And it was a really great kind of landing spot for those brainstorms. So being able to just get it all out, all those ideas, good, bad, and ugly, doesn't matter, but have a landing place for them. That brainstorming can really be a great way to spark inspiration, because one idea could lead to another idea, could lead to another idea. Now, the next technique that I like to use when I am feeling like, okay, I'm ready for that next great idea to hit, is to physically change my environment. So there is something about our environment and our surroundings that are able to influence our creativity. So sometimes that means I need to go work in a different location. So maybe I need to sit in a coffee shop and brainstorm some ideas just by watching people. Airports are another one of my favorite places to people watch, and that can be a great way to just get some work done, but allow that creativity to come in because you're signaling to your brain that we're in a different place. It's kind of on high alert almost. But being able to surround yourself with inspiring objects or people is the goal. So, sometimes that means you have to change where you're working and kind of spark some ideas because you're seeing new people or you're seeing new things. Maybe it's that you go, sit and have lunch or dinner in a restaurant by yourself so that you can kind of overhear conversations and talk to the bar staff and the wait staff. And those conversations can be a great way to kind of spark creativity. And then there's all sorts of ways that you can obtain inspiration from your everyday life. So whether that is being out in nature or reading a new book or having some new conversations, this is a great way to use networking, which is one of those things that most people don't really like to do, but it can be so important because you never know when you're going to have a conversation with a new person that is going to spark that next idea for the podcast. And being able to share examples of situations that seem unrelated, that's where some of those really breakthrough ideas can come from. I cannot tell you how many different podcast episode ideas I have had from conversations that I've had with people, like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I should totally do an episode on that. And so being able to kind of spark inspiration from your everyday life sometimes means you just put yourself in different situations to be inspired. And that whole idea of collaborating and networking. So being able to network with other people who are doing the same sort of thing. I will tell you, when it comes to podcasting, so I record on Riverside. That's the tool that I use. And there is a Facebook group specific to Riverside podcasters. And it has been so helpful just to collaborate with other hosts. We are able to work through technical issues when we're having, little gotchas here and there. I've seen all sorts of editing tips. I've been able to get in touch with people. Sometimes we don't want to do all the work ourselves, and we just need to be able to connect with the people who are really great at doing that thing. And this Facebook group has been super helpful as a way to just collaborate and use that group to find the resources that we need. And sometimes that can really spark some creativity as well, because you can have a conversation with someone and see how they've handled a certain situation, and it will spark this idea for how you can use that in your own show. So being able to collaborate and network is another really helpful technique. And then this one is a little bit more fun and probably less intuitive. So setting aside time for play is an excellent technique for sparking creativity. So whether that play for you is going on a bike ride or actually playing a game of some sort, whatever play looks like to you, being able to introduce this concept of play will oftentimes be just what we need to kind of spark some creativity and to get some inspiration for new ideas. Obviously, you can do, drawing activities and writing exercises, but oftentimes I find so I'm a knitter, so even just spending time knitting sometimes is really therapeutic and just enough to get those creative juices flowing, because I'm physically creating something with my hands. And it kind of, to me, knitting is a little bit monotonous, because it's generally, unless you're counting stitches or doing some complex pattern, it tends to be the same stitch over and over again. And so there's kind of this monotonous tone to the activity, which generally is enough for my mind to kind of loosen up a little bit. And I have had some really great ideas come to me while I am knitting. So just setting aside time to play and do something that you enjoy can sometimes be all you need to kind of spark a little creativity and inspiration for that next big idea. So here's the thing. Ideas are great. Let's get rid of all the blocks preventing us from thinking this idea is amazing. But ideas can only get you so far. You have to actually shift from inspiration into action in order for it to get anywhere and do anything. So this is where it can be really helpful to kind of outline the steps that you need, and then you can break it down into smaller pieces. So listen, the project manager in me spent 20 years in project management in corporate America. And here's what I say project management is. It's babysitting adults. You're basically telling people that they should, go do their job. Because oftentimes project management is just aligning a bunch of different teams who need to kind of work together for a larger goal. But they're all responsible to just do their own job. So it's babysitting adults to do their job. However, if you take the concept of a project plan and apply that to launching a podcast, then you just break out the steps that are needed. At a high level, you need a cover. At a high level, you need a title and some keywords. You need to be able to say something about whatever topic it is that you're going to cover. You need to have structure to your show so that kind of they flow at the same pace in terms of like knowing how long each episode's going to be. But these are just simply creating a plan and being able to set goals, realistic goals, like we talked about last week, and then be able to take some action on those. So it doesn't always have to be, grandiose, big, giant leaps of faith that we are taking. Sometimes it's just, today I'm going to noodle on some ideas for a title of the podcast, because it just keeps those creative juices flowing and it keeps you moving in the direction of launching your podcast. Even if you haven't started recording yet, that's fine. Just do something that's moving you towards that goal. And then, being able to bring those big ideas to life. Oftentimes, this is where people get stuck is, but I don't know the steps that I need to do the thing. I know I want to write a book. I know it's got to have some chapters, but I don't know how to go about getting it edited, or I don't know about, how to sit down and write consistently. Whatever the pieces of the project are that you are struggling with, oftentimes you just need a plan. That's why I have these clarity calls that are available to you guys, because it allows me to help you create your plan. And from there, you can take actionable steps. You can work towards bits and pieces on that plan at whatever pace you need to go. And then you just pull in people to help when you get stuck or with certain pieces of the overall plan. But if you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going. And sometimes you need something that bridges the gap between this big idea to actionable steps. And that plan is what you get from a clarity call with me. So that can be a really helpful step. The last thing to mention is that you want to avoid burnout. So being able to set aside time to do creative work, but also give yourself time to rest and relax and play and have fun and, just chat about what it is that you're doing instead of always having to do. You'll burn out if you don't create a pace that's realistic. So when it comes to podcasting specifically, what I like to tell people is to figure out what your cadence is and what's realistic. So, yeah, maybe you want to have a weekly podcast, but you can't actually set aside to record every single week. But maybe twice a month or once a month, you can sit down and batch record a bunch of different episodes. There's different ways that you can tackle it, but being able to know what's realistic to you and what will prevent you from burning out is important, because anytime we take on one of these big projects, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of tiny actions and it's consistency. And so being able to consistently show up and apply yourself and work towards the goal is important, but in a way that you're not going to get burnout is really important. So if you guys are getting stuck with any one of these steps that we've talked about, or you're trying to figure out, how do I get this idea onto paper? I would like to invite you to join me for a clarity call. Remember, for the month of September, I'm offering these at half off. So instead of $197, they're only $99. You can go to shaunalee.com/clarity-call or send me a DM on Instagram at SimplyShaunna. Either way, I will get you the link, and I would be happy to have you join me on my email list. You can go to shaunalee.com and sign up to join that email list. I am launching my new podcast series soon, and I would love to help you get your podcast off the ground. So I look forward to hearing from you. Can't wait to hear about your big idea. Let's talk soon.
Hey, one last thing before you go. Don't forget to grab your free guide to get your next chapter started today. Let's make this pipe dream of yours this year's reality. Pop on over to shaunalee.com/start again to grab your free guide.